Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Hemang Panchal. This is the 9th webinar exploring the functionality of Powerproject. Previous webinars are on the Solid Support website, where you will also find information on Powerproject online training courses. Remember that Solid Support can help with your Powerproject setup, templates, and code libraries. We are once again lucky to have Chris Ray with us from Microsoft to conduct today's session. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Mang. Thank you everybody for joining, and good morning, everybody. So today's webinar session is talking about delays. Before we get into that, just to be aware, all of you are muted, and you'll see that you've got a little panel that comes up. You can minimize that by clicking on the little arrow, orange arrow pointing to the right. And there is also a question section that you can put questions into, and they will appear. And what we'll aim to do is either answer them as we go through or answer those at the end. Feel free to ask as many questions as you want. If we don't get around to all of them, we will follow them up with any via email or contact from myself or Solid Support. So going into this presentation, this webinar here is, we're going to be looking at delays on your project. And again, this webinar is very much a practical webinar to show you actually in action. There's no smoke and mirrors that are going to be used. We're going to use the software. We're going to pretty much out of the box, just with a few tasks already drawn. Everything else will show you how it's done in that sense, and how you can use this on there. And the areas we're going to be looking at are delays on a project, comparing the project with the delay, so how those delays are happening on the project, what ifs inside the project, reporting on those delays, and then any questions and resolving any questions anyone asks. I mean, the recording of this session is being recorded. It will be made available to you after about, I think it's about 2 or so hours after the session has finished. It will send out an email to you with a link to it. And anyone that hasn't been able to attend, or any colleagues, if you give that link to colleagues, they can also click on it and watch this. So we'll get on to this, and there's only a few slides. We'll do a little bit discussion about this, and then we'll move on. So the first one is delays on a project. Now, all projects have delays in them, and they can be for many different types of reasons. And it's important when you're recording a delay that you do actually record those types of delays on the project as well. And again, if it's a long project, it's a 12-month, 18-month project, at the time you're putting that project in, you may remember what it's there, remember it keenly, but actually as time goes on, if you want to look back, being able to have a record and a history of what those delays were and why they were there is really important. And usually you'd have paperwork backed elsewhere, backing it up in the other areas, but it is important. You know, you can, inside Powerproject, you can actually record that and inside your schedule, so you can report on it and look at that. And then recording delays, again, one of the things we're going to look at is a very simple delay that some people put on a project if an activity gets extended in time. And that's, you can literally just increase the length of that task and make a few notes against it, and that's the recording of it. But you may want to record more details of that, of the actions and the impacts of that, to see separately and report on. Again, you may want to find out how much it was impacted by. So again, we're going to look at the different types of delays and recording the different methods of recording delays. Again, it's your project. You don't want to become a slave to the actual project plan itself, but also you want to put enough information in there that allows you to report on those delays. Comparing the project with the delay. So again, you put these delays in, you want the ability to compare the project with the delay, and then what with that, you know, see where it's impacted, how it impacts, and so forth. All the good stuff that once you put the information in, what you get out of it. And the rule here is really with it, again, is baseline, baseline, baseline. We'll look at baselines as we go through, but the key of a baseline, it takes a snapshot of the entire project at that point in time. And within Powerproject, there is no limit to the number of baselines. And it doesn't just baseline key fields, it baselines the entire project. And that means links, that means codes, that means everything about it, the calendars that were being used. So whatever you change, you can compare and see what's actually happened. So it's really important to understand and see and use those to your advantage within the system. And then move on. And then you've got the what ifs, and this is really using the baselines, but it's also thinking about putting a delay into a project that's happened is just one part of that delay. You would then also look at what you're going to do to mitigate that. And that's where baselines come in and what if scenarios, allowing you to compare the different options you may present to a delay coming in. Again, it could be a client variation order. That would impact it. You can put different scenarios in, how we can show that and how we can see that. So again, it's those types of ones we want to see. And then when we talk about reporting on these, it's how the ability to identify those delays. And this comes back to how we record them and how they're put into the system. Can we extract them from the project? And when we say extract, report on them individually, or have a group of the types of delays. And then useful columns we can use for that for reporting. And that could be variance columns, that could be red, amber, green traffic light signals on delays, and comparing against one or more baselines that you might use. So really that's the overview of what we're going to look at over the next half hour or so in there. And I say, do ask questions as you go through. We're using the system, so we're going to see it in action. So if I open up Powerproject, so I have Powerproject open here. This is Powerproject version 16, latest release in here. And I have a very simple project that's been created from literally going file new and using a simple template, well, the construction template in this one that comes with the software. And then I've just drawn a few activities and summaries to have a basic project. I've done no more than that. I've created no code libraries, nothing else within the system inside here. So what we're now going to look at is delays on a project and how we're going to record those and different ways we can start to record those. So the first one here is that before we do anything, and one of the things previously said was baseline, baseline, baseline. It's just really for you to understand how simple it is to baseline and the advantages over it. Someone's just asking, they can only see the. Can you see my page now? Hopefully you can all see that. Yes, excellent. Good. Sorry, don't know why I didn't switch across there. So in here we have a simple project that's created by a new project and simple ones in there, and we want to see how we can look at baseline it to start with. So we've put the project in. This is our project. I've done my reschedule. That's in place. Everything's in place. I have turned off the critical path and so forth in there just for simplicity. It is all there, but I've chosen not to show it just for simplicity. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through how we would baseline this. So I'm just going to go into the project tab and I'm just going to baseline my project in there. Click on new baseline, and I'm going to say this might be my contract baseline in there. Click on finish, and it's now created a baseline for me. You can see that baseline is displayed as yellow bars underneath in there, and that baseline will now stay in place and you cannot move it. So if I make any changes to my project, like so, and then I just simply reschedule my project in there, you can now see how that's changed in comparison to it. We're on schedule, then we go out, and then we see the impact of what's going on there. Now that baseline I've created, every object, every task, every calendar, every code, every link has been baselined. And when I go into my baseline again in here, I have an option to create as many of them as I want. There is no limit to the number of baselines I can create. And so it's really important to understand at the beginning, even if you don't put in, even if you're not looking recording delays in this way or whatever, baseline, baseline, baseline. It really is an advantage for what you can see and use. And you may never use those baselines, but they actually can be used at any time. You could go back and say, I want to look at 5 weeks ago, 12 weeks ago, and do a comparison and see how they are. You can even open up an old baseline and bring an older baseline with it, compare week 15 with week 8 if you wanted to. But you may not use them, and all it's done is create an extra baseline file. And these baselines can be created alongside the actual project file you've got, or inside it, your choice of which you do. But if you're doing lots of them, just create them as standalone baselines. So I've created that baseline there. I have the ability inside baselining. I can actually choose here, I can turn off baselining. So I've got a baseline there, but I don't have to see it. I can display at any one time on screen up to 10 baselines. But again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that's your standard use because it could be quite confusing, but it is useful to know that you can have 10 at a time turned on, but it can create unlimited number of baselines in there. So again, I can just turn those on and off. And again, even when I've baselined and made changes and so forth, remember, when I undo things, it's not going to undo that baseline. That baseline is always going to be there for me now to use. So whenever I go, it's always there, and I'm now at that point inside. And I can change the colors and so forth. And we'll look in a little while when we look at some other details about analyzing, reporting, how we can see those delays inside, how the delays have impacted it. So the first thing is when we talk about delays is how we add a delay to a project. Now, as I said, the simplest way that people add a delay in would maybe just to make that change. That site office canteen has now been extended. I've extended it and I see the impact. And again, that achieves what you want to do, but there's been a delay on site on that task. And again, if I show my baseline inside here, just to show my baseline there, I can see that. And I can even add a column in that shows me the duration variance to see that there was a delay of 8 days on there. And that's the duration variance. And I can see if I add a finish variance column in, and we'll talk about these a bit more as we go through, I can see in here that the impact that's had on the finish of all these tasks, you can see that 8 days has trickled through all the way to the end. And that's useful, but it doesn't tell me much about that delay. So again, what I'm going to do is I've put the delay in, but over in my code libraries here, which I can use to code up my different tasks, I'm actually going to create a new code library called delay type. And I could do here, I could now create a new code library in there called client delay, and change the color of that. I could actually add a new one in called weather. I put one in there. I put that orange inside there. And I can create another one in there in code library, and this could be subcontract. And you could keep on going through on that and have that for different reasons inside there. Now I've got that created in there, I could say that this delay here was particularly a client delay, was change or something, or access wasn't granted, and I can put that in, and I might even choose to add a column in for my notes in here, and I could put here so I can have that. So in there now I can see that it's a client delay, and I can even add in a column to show from the codes what the delay type was. And again, this could be set up in your template, so it's already there for every project you do. But suddenly I have this ability now to see the project, and I can see now the delay types and what they are. I might have had a delay over here, and I can say, well, that was, and I could either drag it across, or I could click in here and say that was a weather delay, bad rain, whatever you want, and in there, and I can put those in there. And because I've done that, at any point I could, when we talk about reporting, I can actually open up that, and I can see the different delay types that have taken place in the program, and go back, and I can see how that's impacted it in there. Now again, what I've simply done there is I'm recording it, and I've made some extensions of the time in there, and that's useful. And at a minimum, recommended put that in, put some coding and notes in against it, so you've got that in place. But again, that doesn't tell you the full story of the delay, because all we've done is extend it in time. So what I can do is I can actually, if I just undo this in there, so I've undone that delay in there. Just put those in. Okay, put those in, and if I just reduce that duration by 5 days. I just want to keep the code libraries at the moment. Okay, and recalculate that. That allows me to put that in place. But what I'm going to say is now is I might want to say we've got a delay here, so I could actually insert a task here. So I could actually remove this code from here and just set it to none. And there, but I'm going to leave that delay in there, and then I could actually draw in my 6-day delay or my 8-day delay, and I could call this delay restricted access in there, and then just draw in my links to that, and where I've got that link coming off there, I can just move that link around, and I can do this. And again, it gives me my impact over the overall, but I can now see this, and I can code this up as my delay type. And I can see that, and it still shows me here that I've had an 8-day delay because of that. But I now have a piece of activity that can be seen as the individual 8-day task that's actually had the impact for me. So suddenly this is now its own line, its own separate area that I can use to work on that. So it's very useful to add those extra activities in. Now here again, what I've done is I've just added this one activity in as a delay, but this delay might be more than just one. It might be a variation that's come from the client in there because of the change. So what I can do is there, rather than just creating my single task in here, I could actually down at the bottom, I could put this in as client variation order 1, whatever it is. I can draw a task in there, and let's just make that into a summary task. And then underneath I can say step 1, step 2 for the delay, or whatever those are, the delays in there, and that's 3 days 5 there. I can link that so that actual variation, that changes, are actual tasks themselves, and I can actually move those into the summary task there. And then all I need to do is I can then say, well, that delay took place, and it may be, rather than this bad weather one I've had in here, or it might be, let me just choose one inside here that I can delete that there, that back there. What I can do is I can do the link here to there, and I can do a link in to there, for example. And now when I reschedule it, I can see how that impact has now happened on that. And again, you have a separate variation section in here. In my program at the top, I've got this all in one, but I could start to say, well, actually, I just want to have this as part of my project. And this, I could have a number of variations down here that could be summarized as my variations or delays or whatever inside there. But it now means I can see the variation in detail, or that, or vice versa. And over here, they're in completely separate sections. So for reporting and looking at becomes really useful as we go through. Now that's useful in there, but this variation could be something that clients come and say, I want to change this, I want to change that, but you don't know yet if they are going to, because they may be asking, you may want to go back to them and say, well, the impact is X or Y if you do that. So what we can do here is these links which are having impacts are just normal links that we've drawn within the project. And again, if I just turn off my grid lines, so you can see those in there, I can even turn off my holiday tasks just so you can see those. We can see those in place. These links themselves are just not, as I say, are just normal links. Now, one of the functions that Powerproject has in here is if I go into the Library Explorer, and again, Library Explorer is where you create objects that and items you're going to use in your project. They can already be set up in your template. I'm just going to go into link category. And again, this is the different types of links you've got inside there. So I'm going to create a new link category that's going to be called client delay in there. And I'm going to change the color of that client delay. So I'm going to make it a nice orange color. I'm going to make it nice and thick in there. Set the arrowheads to be the same. Like so there. Longer, wider. So you can see the difference in there. And now I'm going to come back to my project. And inside my project, what I'm going to do is this impact link going from my variation, I'm going to go into the properties of that link. And I can change that link now to my new link category. So now I've done that, we can see that's now visually showing me that delay, which is also useful when you're looking at a project when it's got a lot more activities in it. But what really becomes nice is if I just do a reschedule as I would normally do, it is what it is. But if I go to my reschedule options, what I have the ability to do in here is I can actually go into here and actually say ignore the client delay links. Now this becomes really powerful because now when I reschedule, it's going to ignore that link. So this is what my project would look like if I didn't have the variation. And then if I just turn that back on, by unticking it in there, I can then reschedule it and see this is what it's going to look like in there. So I can put these in and then demonstrate that to people, the impact and delay. And by doing the various finish variants and so forth, I can see how that's impacting my project. So it becomes a really powerful way to monitor and watch and look at your project in there. And again, there's no limit to the number of link categories you can create, but you could have a client delay links, you could have procurement delay links and so forth, and you could turn them off. And what would our project look like if we didn't have the procurement delays? What would our project look like if we didn't have client delays or variations or change requests and so forth? You could then monitor that and see what that looks like. And again, I could create this and I could now say, okay, well, if I go to my project and go to baseline manager and say this is variation 001 delay impact inside here, set that to a nice orange in there. And then in my format here, I can turn that off or turn it on. I need to change the color again, actually, but I'll come back to that. But I can do that. And now what I can do is I can now go into my reschedule inside here, options, put that on to ignore that and reschedule it. And now I can show the delays on my project. And again, I could select just the project there, and I could now demonstrate to my clients that if they have that variation, this is the impact on here. And remember, what I'm doing here is I'm just showing you the impact in time. Now, if you've got resources and costs and you adjust those on there, it would show you all of that as well. So it remembers everything about it. So you could add extra costs to it and so forth to see that impact. But it's really important to record stuff, and this baselining function, as you can see, baseline as often as you want, and you have that ability to see all of this information. And again, if you don't want to see that with these baselines, you can just turn them off, and you're left with this in this side here. So it becomes a very powerful way to add in and display that information on your project. And that leads us into this what if scenarios with your project, because those baselines you can do. So if I am just going to here just to undo. There, let me just undo. There, it all goes back. So I've removed all the variations. I'm back to the start as we were in there, and if I just, there we go. That's as we started inside there. What if scenarios, because again, delays, you can put them in historically that something happened, but if you know it's coming up, you can put it in there as we say. And with variations, and again, you add the variations down here. So this could be variation 1 in there, and I could say that that was a task there, and that's going to happen between that task there and that task. Let's go to there, and I could then just reschedule that, and that sees pushes it out. I can then baseline that as my VO1 in there. But again, I could then say, okay, well, actually, I'm going to undo that in there. So I'm going to undo that, and I could undo the whole thing if I wanted to in there. And I could say, well, there's an alternate one that actually the change is going to be this long. There, and let's just say that's going to impact from here to here. So this is the same variation, but different scenarios we're working on in here. In there, and I do that, and I reschedule, and that shows me how it's going to be. I can, let me just turn off my VO1, and I can now say, well, actually, that's going to be a possible scenario, which might be variation 01 version 2. So it might be a different scenario which may save money, but actually going to take further time in there. That's fine. And then I can actually, if I wanted to, I can actually select all of my tasks inside here and go into my baseline manager, select my original or my baseline I want to, click on revert to, and restore deleted and changed objects, or do a full overwrite. And that's now taken it back to how it was. But I can also then, in my baseline manager, let me just say that one there is orange, that one is there is in blue. And so I can now, if I want to, go to a client and demonstrate those changes and the alternate impacts depending on the scenario they want to choose. And so you can prepare for this. And it also means this is not delays that happen, this is mitigating delays that have happened and proposing those to people. The key is recording all of it, keeping those baselines all the time. And it allows you to track all this information. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense so far, that what we've done is we've so far looked at how we can add a delay in. We can record that delay as in code libraries to mark it up. We can have it as an individual task. We can have it as a separate task, or we can have it as a whole separate section for the variation. Depends, and pick the one that you would want to use and you can manage on your project. So use that, but the key with all of this is baseline, baseline, baseline. There's so many options with baselines once you've got them that you can choose to do. Just put those back on in there. So again, and I can turn all baselines off in one go, or I can turn individual baselines off as I go through inside there. So with those baselines, and again, I'm just going to remove this. And again, because I've started from the brand new project that you will get with Powerproject, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to now say, okay, with my baselines, if we start again here now, and we've got this auContact program, if I put some delays into here, we've got that one delay there. Let's put a few delays inside here. And now once we've made those delays and we display that baseline with it, so I'm just going to go to my contract baseline so I can see the changes. There's a whole range of fields that we can add in. And again, I can add these in just by clicking add column, go down to the date one, and I can see my start variance. I can add another one in, and I can change that to duration variance. And I can add another one in to finish variance inside there under date. And that shows me the history of what's happened. And in actual fact, if I was looking at this, I could even turn off my bar chart and give this to people to show them, these 3 columns are telling the story of what's happened to the project so far. So I can see, we had a 9-day delay which happened there, that started 8 days later, that was 1 day, and so forth. So we can see what was built up to that side where I had a 14-day delay. And these columns here, I can simply just format those, very much like an Excel look. I can set that to duration. I want to see that in days, and I want to see it in there, no decimal places in there. So we have a consistency on the days inside there. But again, we don't even need to see the bar chart. We don't even need to see the baseline necessarily. It tells us the story, the running story of what's happened compared to our agreed contract version or the original or the currently agreed version of that project. But I can do more than that because I can actually add in a column here. Now, down at the bottom, we've got formulae. So formulas inside here. And we've got one, if I go down to task, I've got a start variance red, amber, green. And that allows me to choose that. And this is a little formula. And this formula is actually saying anything, that's 0 days is low, which is green, and think 3 days is medium, and think above 5 days becomes high, which is red. Now you could actually edit that formula and have the start variance rank do your criteria. And so we now see we've got columns in there, so I can add in again. We've got formula, and these all come with the standard template ones I'm seeing in. Nothing, no smoke and mirrors or pre-prepared items I've got here. And I can do duration variance inside there, and I can set that to center there, and I'll just add another one in, and I'm just going to set that to let's say under task, I can set that to finish variance rank. So now I have in there, let me just format it so it looks nicer. I have my columns there, and again, those columns I could have, move each one of those to the start inside there, and even if I had that, I could see what happened, what was right, what was wrong, what was a possible problem happening within it. And if I did that comparisons with my different scenarios, that would become really powerful inside there. And my comparison in here, my RAG is going against my current baseline, and I can choose in my baseline manager to change which baseline I'm comparing with. So it becomes a very useful way of displaying that information. Again, all of this information, if you don't want to see it, you don't have to see it. The baseline is going to be turned off, and you can just have your normal project plan, simply working with it and just recording that information against it. But remember, the baselines remembers everything from position to progress to cost to resource, however complex you want it to be. You've made your project and how much detail you put in there, you can record that information inside there. A couple of other notes, what you can do inside here, if I have a delay here that I'm recording as a variation or a separate item down here, it'll go red because there is no baseline with it here on there. But just to show you, if I just move that back, actually just get rid of those for the moment. Let's see the durations again. So I've got that task in. If I want that to happen in the middle of that task, I can actually split that task, and I'm going to split it in half, for example, which I can put there, and I can now draw in a link there, a link to there inside that. And then when I do my reschedule, it now has had an impact on that. So that's in my existing task that's been split into 2, and I can see how that's impacted over here. And remember, if I coded it up and put codes on it, I would be able to see that side of it as well. So again, recapping on that, we use code libraries to code them up so we can see the difference in colors and can filter on those. We've used the link categories by going in here and going to the properties and changing the link category in there. So these can be impacted or not impacting on a reschedule. They're a great option if you've got delays that might be resource driven, so you don't have enough resources to do that. You could put those in, or you're there, but then you could turn those off. If you said, if we didn't have any restrictions, what would it look like? So inside that side, and then once we did that, we showed the red, amber, green columns and the variance columns inside here. And again, with these variance columns that I've got in here, we also then have the ability, when I'm in filtering, again using none of the preset ones, but create a new filter in there. You can actually filter, and I can filter on tasks and milestones, and I can filter on variance values, and I can look for task variance where the finish variance is greater than, I can say, 10 days inside there. And if I did that on there, and match against the contract baseline, finish on that, just put it on there, and that's found none. I just go back to filter properties, so that's too far. Next, let's say minus 10 days. And there we go. So there are the ones that are finishing on that side of it in there. So you can see compared to the contract baseline in that side of it. So, and again, I can turn it off, but you can filter out your information you want. You can look at the in there, and I think I put minus, I should be greater, it should be less than to get that information I wanted inside there. But you can filter out the information. And again, all of this we're looking at is just duration based, but every column you have inside here. So if I had cost inside here, here's my cost information where I can assign costs, but I can also, if I look at my earned value, I have cost variances in, total cost variances in there, schedule variances inside there that I could do comparisons to as well. I can look at effort variance if I've got resources assigned and so forth. So it really allows me to look at everything. And again, even if I'm looking at my project at a high level, so I did just say show to level 1, I can see at very high level what the impact is. We started on time, we took 16 days longer than expected, and we finished 16 days late. This started 16 days late here, took 14 days more than we expected, so hence we finished 30 days in the part outside of that. And there's a little bonus side what you can do in here in your project, and if I just go into here and just open this up, I can finish, I might have chosen in my project to add my contingency in there, and I can draw a task in and say we've got 18 days of contingency. I can link that in, and I can choose to make that into a buffer task. And a buffer task means it will fill that gap. So if I reschedule that, it's fine. But if I then make a change here and said we've got a further delay of a few days inside here, and I reschedule that, end states where it is, and I do that, and you can then track those by adding columns in from here for your buffer task. So I can look at my buffer task, and I can look at my original buffer task duration, and I can also look at buffer consumption. So I've consumed 36.84% of my buffer task contingency that I built into it. So it becomes a useful way if you are putting delays in and you have got built-in contingency. I'm sure no one does that at the end of their project, but if you did, you have that ability to track that contingency from that side. That's a little bonus just added in what you can do and what people do. And we're doing it at the end of the project. Some people may fit it within each phase of there and use different types of links and flags on it. But worthwhile, you know, if any of this you need to find out more, have a word with solid support. If you don't already have Powerproject, let them know, or go to our website. You can download a trial version of Powerproject, which gives you 14-day full functionality trial of it. And again, if you need training on any of this, solid support can also assist in that side of it. So at this point, I'm just open it up to see if anyone has any questions about what they've seen. If there's anything anyone wants to see, with a couple of questions, or one question in the moment in here. So again, the code library, someone's asked if we have to create the code library every time. You can set your own template up. So Powerproject itself allows you, and the options, it tells you under the file locations where your templates are stored. So here's my template path here. Any Powerproject PP file you put in that template will automatically become a template for when you go file new. And a template can contain code libraries, calendars, resources, cost, even tasks and summaries inside there. So it allows you to do all of that. Baselining, let's say there's no limit on the baselining inside there. And as you see, it takes a few seconds to create a baseline. And it works just quite happily in there. Do we have any other questions on those couple we've had so far? No, I think that's it at the moment. I thank everybody for joining this session. Thank you for spending your time here. This recording will be available, and if you do have any questions, do reach out to Solid Support myself, and we'll go from there. I think. One. So again, someone's asking about how the link categories affect in P6. If it's not a function of P6, it will just go across as a normal link category. It will be as a normal link. It will just be, it can only take across what's available to it. So, and again with Microsoft Project and so forth. There is inside the help, the online help, it does talk about the things that will be lost and changed in that side. So that side of it, and in version 15 and then now 16, the report on when you go in and out of the other systems, P6 or Microsoft Project, it does generate a little report about any items that are a problem and a log file that you can view to see on that side of it. We'd also welcome, and I've got one, someone's asked, Gary's asked about next one maybe being on some functions and formulas. Happy to do that if people are interested in that. Do let us know the ideas of what you want for the next sessions, or any future sessions you'd like to see. If maybe something we've already done, something in a bit more detail, something other than that. Someone's asked about exporting baselines to P6. So when you export from P6 or to P6, it's an XCR, so it doesn't contain the baseline data. So you would have to import it as a separate XCR file, but it would maintain the dates as they are in there. So an XCR doesn't contain the baseline, but you can export the XCR as a baseline, or the baseline as an XCR from P6, and then inside Powerproject, in your baseline manager here, you have an import option. And in here, you can actually import that XCR as a baseline directly into your project and do a comparison. So the advantage here is that if you're dealing with clients or other people that have got other systems, so they've got P6, for example, and you've got Powerproject, as long as you've got your unique task identifier, so your activity ID in P6 or in Powerproject, we call it our unique task ID. So as long as they are the same for the relevant tasks, it will match the baseline tasks along with that. Someone's asking if you can have the function to highlight the color of the tasks. There isn't a way of highlighting the color of the tasks to see the impact. That would be a code you would do. But if you've written a formula to find them, you could then filter, find, and change the color of those as you wanted to. But again, as it doesn't do it at the moment, it's always worth it. Could be as a way to do that. And I don't know. I would have to look more about the P6 XML format. But as far as I know, I don't think it's in there as the default for us. But we can find out more about that. So, any other questions anyone has in here? If not, thank you very much. And you'll get a copy of the recording. And if you do have further questions, just reach out and we can go from there. On that, thank you very much for attending. And we'll speak to you and see you hopefully soon.